Welcome to our channel, where incredible stories unfold right before your eyes. We're so glad you're here with us today. Before we dive into today's thrilling tale, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know. Whether you're in a bustling city or a quiet town, it's always amazing to see how stories connect us all. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss tomorrow's special story. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let's get started with today's adventure. When terror strikes Buckingham Palace, a royal guard's quick reaction. James Carter, a 40-year-old royal guard stationed at Buckingham Palace, stood still at his post, his gaze scanning the crowd of tourists passing by. To the untrained eye, he appeared as immovable as the palace itself. But beneath his composed exterior, every sense was alert, honed by 2 decades of military service. The day had started like any other, filled with tourists taking photos and marveling at the grandeur of the royal palace. But something felt off. As the crowd flowed around him, Carter's sharp eyes locked onto a man who seemed out of place. The man's movements were too deliberate, too calculated. He wasn't admiring the architecture or posing for selfies like the rest. His eyes darted from point to point, scanning the area and observing the guards. Carter's instincts, owned over years of training in high-risk environments, immediately went on high alert. The man's attire struck Carter as unusual. He wore an expensive coat, but the boots were worn, the kind of footwear used by someone who prioritized function over fashion. The scent that lingered in the air was another red flag. Beneath the unmistakable aroma of high-end cologne, Carter caught a faint but familiar smell: gun oil. It was a smell that took him back to his days in the service, a reminder of the dangerous situations he'd faced before. The man's path through the crowd seemed aimless at first, but Carter recognized it for what it was: a classic infiltration tactic. The stranger was systematically working his way closer to the palace gates, all while maintaining the appearance of a casual tourist. Carter's training kicked into overdrive, piecing together the evidence before him. The calculated movements, mismatched clothing, and the subtle scent of gun oil painted a picture of someone with military training. But unlike Carter, who used his skills to protect, the man's intentions seemed far more sinister. The realization sent a chill down Carter's spine. This wasn't just a random tourist, and it wasn't just a harmless encounter. Something was wrong, and Carter knew he had to be ready. Every fiber of his being screamed that the situation could turn dangerous at any moment. As the stranger drew nearer, the tension in the air thickened, and Carter stood firm, waiting for the first sign of an action that would determine whether the day would end in tragedy or triumph. James Carter's instincts were on high alert. He had seen enough in his 20 years of military service to know when something wasn't right, and everything about this situation screamed danger. The man's deliberate movements, the incongruity of his expensive coat and worn boots, the smell of gun oil lingering under his cologne, it all pointed to one thing: this man was no ordinary tourist. He was someone who had been trained to blend in, to mask his true intentions. Carter's sharp eyes followed him, watching the stranger's every move as he closed in on the palace gates. Carter's mind raced as he pieced together the evidence. The man's path through the crowd was far too calculated. Every step he took seemed intentional. Every glance he made seemed designed to avoid suspicion. But Carter wasn't fooled. His military experience had taught him to spot these patterns. This was a classic infiltration tactic. Carter had used similar techniques himself in the past, moving through crowds without drawing attention while quietly assessing his surroundings. But unlike Carter, this man wasn't blending in to protect. He was blending in to strike. The tension in the air thickened as the stranger grew closer to the gates. Carter knew that every second mattered. He had to act fast. The man's behavior was too methodical to be anything but a threat. His mind began running through potential scenarios. If the man pulled a weapon, if he tried to rush the gates, or if he tried to make a move on the crowd. Carter's heart raced, but his face remained stoic. He had been in high-stress situations before, and his training had taught him to keep his composure. The stranger's movements seemed to grow more deliberate with every passing moment, as if he was getting ready to make his move. Carter's eyes never left him. His training had prepared him for this very moment, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the next few seconds would decide everything. Would the man make his move now? Or was he simply assessing the situation for a larger plan? Carter's hand subtly moved closer to his side, preparing for whatever might come next. The stakes had never felt higher. As the stranger drew closer to the gates of Buckingham Palace, Carter's every muscle tensed. The man's calculated approach, the way he blended seamlessly with the crowd, only reinforced Carter's growing suspicion. It was now undeniable. This wasn't just a curious tourist. The man's movements, though casual, were far too deliberate, too methodical. Carter knew the signs. Years of experience had taught him to read people like a book, and this man's story was one of danger. He wasn't just walking, he was hunting. The stranger's words shattered the tense silence. His voice, cold and filled with contempt, rang out through the air. "Empires are crumbling," he sneered, scanning the crowd. "Tolerance is weakness." Carter's trained ears caught the rhetoric immediately, and the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. It wasn't just idle chatter. This wasn't a man who was angry at the world. This was a man with a purpose, and his words were designed to provoke. Carter's training kicked in, his mind processing the situation in overdrive. This matched the propaganda he'd seen in briefings about extremist groups, groups that used words like these to manipulate and incite. Carter could see the effect the stranger's words were having on the crowd. The once carefree atmosphere had shifted. A mother pulled her children closer, an elderly man stiffened, and a group of teenagers huddled together, their laughter replaced by nervous whispers. The crowd, once full of excitement, was now filled with unease. Carter didn't need to look at the crowd to know what was happening. The stranger had done exactly what he had hoped. He had planted seeds of fear. As the man's tirade continued, Carter remained stone-faced, his mind calculating every word, every move. This wasn't just a verbal assault, it was a psychological attack. The stranger wasn't just trying to rile up the crowd, he was fishing for a reaction, testing for weaknesses. Carter understood the game. The man was trying to provoke someone, anyone, to react, to break the calm. But Carter wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Carter's eyes never left the stranger. He had seen this tactic before, the manipulation of emotions, the attempt to turn a peaceful setting into something darker. But Carter knew better. He had faced similar provocations before, and he wasn't about to let this man win. His training was all about maintaining composure in the face of chaos. As the stranger's words grew sharper, Carter stood his ground, his silence speaking volumes. The stranger's attempts to shake him were failing, but Carter couldn't ignore the growing tension in the air. The next move could be critical, and Carter was ready for whatever came next. As the stranger's words grew more aggressive, Carter's senses heightened. The tension in the air thickened, each word from the man like a spark in a powder keg. The crowd around them was growing more uneasy, shifting nervously, their earlier excitement fading. Carter remained perfectly still, his stone-cold gaze locked on the stranger. The man's voice, dripping with venom, was clearly aimed at provoking a reaction. "You're nothing but a puppet," he spat, his eyes flashing with rage. A mindless drone protecting a dying institution. The stranger's words were becoming more personal, more pointed. Carter could feel the underlying aggression beneath them. It was no longer just about the crowd or the words. This man was trying to provoke him, to break through the composure he had built up over decades of service. Carter didn't flinch, didn't move an inch. His years of training had prepared him for moments like this. He had faced extremists before, seen how they used psychological tactics to break those around them. He wasn't going to let that happen now. As the stranger circled closer, his body language shifted, becoming more erratic. His hands clenched into fists, his posture widening, betraying his growing frustration. Carter's focus never wavered. His mind was calculating the next move. Every word, every gesture the stranger made was being analyzed for signs of escalation. Carter could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him. The crowd was now fully aware of the danger, their fear palpable. It wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a potential disaster waiting to unfold. The man's words began to slip, his carefully constructed facade cracking. His accent, once neutral, began to harden, the bitterness seeping through as he aimed his venom directly at Carter. Carter's eyes narrowed, his instincts screaming that the man was getting ready to make a move. He could see the shift in the stranger's eyes, the subtle tightening in his grip. The situation was close to boiling over, and Carter knew it. Carter's mind raced through the possible scenarios. Was the man planning to pull a weapon? Was this just a distraction before something far worse happened? Carter's combat-honed reflexes were on full alert now. The air was thick with anticipation. The next few seconds would decide everything. Carter's body was coiled like a spring, ready to act at a moment's notice, the tension hanging in the air as if time itself was holding its breath. The air was thick with tension. Carter stood still, his body coiled with anticipation as the stranger's words escalated into a furious tirade. The crowd around them was on edge, their discomfort now turning into outright fear. People were backing away, instinctively reaching for their phones, some already dialing emergency services. Carter's gaze never left the man in front of him, but his mind was moving at lightning speed, analyzing every possible outcome. The stranger's words, filled with rage and venom, were only adding fuel to the fire. "You're nothing but a puppet," he spat, "protecting a crumbling empire." It was clear now, this man wasn't just trying to provoke the guard, he was trying to ignite something. His body language had shifted, too. What started as calculated movements now became more erratic, his gestures sharper, more hostile. Carter's focus sharpened even more. He wasn't just dealing with a verbal threat. There was something deeper here. The stranger was preparing for something. He was close to snapping. Then, in a heartbeat, the man's hand moved. Carter's combat instincts flared, his mind already processing the movement. The stranger's hand dipped beneath his coat, and the unmistakable outline of a pistol began to emerge. Carter's heart skipped a beat, but his body didn't move. He had been trained for moments like this. He could see the weapon clearly now, a CZ-75B, a firearm favored by extremists, with clear signs of modifications meant for close-quarters combat. Carter's eyes registered every detail, the custom grip, the enhanced slide release. This was no amateur. This was someone with intent, and the realization sent a cold chill down Carter's spine. The crowd froze, horror spreading through them. For a split second, time seemed to stop. Carter's senses were on overdrive, but his movements remained controlled. The stranger's fingers tightened around the grip, his knuckles whitening, and Carter's training kicked in, reading the subtle signs of an imminent attack. With lightning speed, the stranger raised the weapon, but Carter was already in motion. In one smooth, practiced motion, his hand shot out, grabbing the barrel of the gun and twisting it away. The stranger's eyes widened in shock as Carter effortlessly disarmed him, the weapon falling to the ground in pieces. It was over before anyone even realized what had happened. The crowd let out a collective gasp as the fugitive stood there, his plans shattered in an instant. Carter stood firm, his composure unwavering, the weapon now disassembled and out of the man's reach. The tension, once unbearable, began to ease, but Carter's mind never stopped. His eyes scanned the area for any signs of further threats, but for now, the danger had passed. The crowd, still reeling from the shock, began to process what had just occurred. Lives had been saved, a crisis averted, and in that brief moment, Carter's training had made all the difference. Thank you for watching this incredible story unfold. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the tense standoff between the Royal Guard and the armed stranger. How do you think James Carter handled the situation? Do you think his quick thinking and years of training were the only things that saved the day? Or could the outcome have been different if he reacted differently? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stay calm under pressure? How would you have reacted in a life-threatening situation like this? Share your experiences in the comments below. We want to hear your stories and insights. This video is a reminder of how important it is to stay vigilant and prepared, even in the most unexpected situations. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. We have more thrilling tales lined up, and you won't want to miss them. Thank you again for watching, and don't forget to like and comment to join the conversation. We appreciate your support and can't wait to hear what you think.